Welcome to this episode of the Customer-Centric Retailing Podcast, a forum for retail leaders to discuss industry trends, challenges, and opportunities.
This is Anil.
And this is Fabi, and each episode we invite some of the brightest minds in the industry to discuss the future of customer centricity, with topics ranging from the rise of e-commerce to brick-and-mortar operations, to omnichannel technology to retail culture, and how all of these elements come together to create customer-centric retailing. Today we have with us Ted McCaffrey, self-proclaimed omnichannel enthusiast, former sales director at eBay, and consultant for Sensormatic. Ted is an RFID expert, which he believes is the key to achieving inventory visibility and flexible fulfillment. Welcome to the podcast, Ted. It's great to have you.
Thanks, Fabiana. How are you today?
We're great. We're excited to jump right in. I think this episode is going to be, really interesting for our audience because you have such an interesting area of expertise, specifically in RFID technology, which for our audience members that may not know stands for radio frequency identification technology. And Ted, you obviously have, a really strong background, in this technology in particular and its applications to the retail industry. For our audience members that may not be familiar with it, I thought it would be nice to just get started with you explaining a little bit in more detail about what it is and what its role is in omnichannel retailing.
Yeah, thank you, Anil and Fabiana. Thank you. So RFID, has been around for a very long time, but in 2004, that's when it really started to take effect. When Walmart, Target, DoD, a lot of different organizations thought that they could use it in their supply chain to get better visibility. And that's when it was a technology. So you move forward when you move from being a technology to being a solution, almost like what Omnichannel was to retailing, right? And so in the early 2000s, we were just seeing if it worked, where it worked, how it worked. Now it's becoming integrated into the point of sale, into the item files, into the OMSs, into all the different enterprise solutions to give retailers better visibility on what is where. I was listening to the president of Microsoft talk about the virus that hit from the Russian virus that got into all of our systems, that got into their systems through one of their suppliers or one of their partners. And he said, what's interesting is it got in through the back door, and then as soon as it got into the back door, they closed the back door and they opened a window. And so then they opened a window and allowed them to get in and see everyone's data and what have you. And that's the challenge that retailers have, is that when an item comes into the store, sometimes they don't know where that item is. And they don't know where it lives. Is it in the back room? Is it on a display shelf? Where is it so that the customer can get it? And so that's where RFID now is that, especially with omnichannel retail, what's happening is these stores and their inventory in their stores has never been more important. And so you as a manager of the store, you need to be able to understand where that item lives so you can get it to the customer right away. So does that make sense? So literally RFID is barcode on steroids. Barcode developed in 1974. Now you've got RFID that enables you to see where an item is without actually hitting the barcode anymore. Now you can wave a wand and get a Geiger counter to find out where it is. And now you can scan with two handhelds. Lululemon goes out and they scan their entire store every week, and it takes them an hour to do it with two handhelds, which is just transformative.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and I think you already gave a couple of examples, but I'm curious if you have more examples or maybe stories of retailers that you see that are already taking advantage of the technology, doing it really well. And I'm also curious how you became so attracted to this area of expertise as well.
Well, you know what? I think where I became attracted, I left my company, Tyco, and now we're a part of Johnson Controls. I left the company in 2013 and went to a division of eBay where we sold omnichannel solutions, buy online, pick up a store, buy online, ship to store, buy online, ship from store, all those omnichannel solutions. And we hosted all that data from over 35 different retailers. And what I saw is the level of effort that it took to go find that inventory, and how they were canceling orders because they couldn't find it in time, how they were splitting orders because they couldn't find a complete order in one store, how they were spending all the labor dollars going out and looking for items. I mean, one of our chains, they were shipping 600 to 700 items a day, digital items a day from their store during the peak selling period. And 50% of the time, they would go out and look for it and they couldn't find it. So that's crazy, right? So that's the definition of insanity, doing the same thing every day and expecting a different result. And literally, this is what they were doing. And so you look at someone like a Macy's. You just look at two sections that are that you can't tell what the stock position is: intimates and denim. You look at a denim wall and you can't tell all the different sizes and styles and what have you. You look at it, everything looks alike. Intimates, the same thing. Everything looks alike. With RFID, you can take a scan and know exactly what you're missing from the floor to bring it up to the front so that it's available for the customer. So that's a huge deal. The other thing that I think Macy's did is they used to withhold what's called safety stock from omnichannel availability, and they withheld $1 billion worth of their stock that would make it available for a customer to ship from store or buy online pickup in store. When they started with RFID and they started telling all their hundreds of wholesale community to start putting RFID tags on, what happened is they were able to scan their entire stores once a month, and they were able to reduce that safety stock to nothing. So they called it ship to the last, or pick to the last unit. So they didn't want to withhold anything from a safety stock standpoint. And so that was a big deal for them.
That's fascinating, and I like your background there as well. I think, I like your comparison when you compared it to the barcode, because it's been around for a while. It feels pretty archaic at this point. I'm curious, though, when it comes to technology in general, we talk on this podcast a lot about how hesitant retailers are to adopt new things, especially if it's somewhat outside of the mainstream, or if they're just really used after, decades and decades of using a particular process or technology. So how big of a lift is it to actually implement RFID technology within your stores? How long would you say it takes to implement for a brand?
So typically when a retailer will look at RFID, what they will do is we recommend doing what's called a proof of concept pilot. So in other words, what you do is you take 3 to 5 stores, and you would, in the distribution center where they ship products to the store, you segment all that inventory for those 3 to 5 stores, and the DC, the distribution center, would actually convert all those items to RFID. And then you go into the store and you have what's called a tagging party, where you tag up the entire store, right? So that process, the proof of concept, takes about 6 months to understand how it works in your store, what are the benefits you get from it. How do you tie into their planogram? A lot of people call it POG excellence, planogram excellence, to understand what needs to be on the floor of the store itself in order to get that. So that takes about 6 months. Once you understand how it works in those 3 to 5 stores, then you decide to deploy. And so depending upon whether you're vertically integrated, where you control your supply chain like a Lululemon does, or whether you are an open supply chain like Macy's does, where you got to tell Levi's and all the intimates wholesale community, you need to start putting tags on at source, RFID tags on at source. And once you get that process going, then it becomes easier to do and implement. So that's where that it could take a year or two to really get say a chain like Zumiez, which has hundreds of suppliers. They got their own private label. They decide they want to move forward. They're a 700 store chain, a little skateboarder type clothing and apparel and footwear. It would take them a while to get that whole supply chain up and running with RFID. So
Well, Ted, there's something really interesting that you presented, that going from a barcode-based, old style of, keeping track of what we got, which essentially is nothing but a manual counting of items, to a real automated magical thing, like, you have a wand, reminds. So so it's really, big transformation for our retailers from looking at things from a very legacy point of view to looking at those things and working in a very modern way, much more relying on technology. So, and like Fabi said, retailers are generally, in our conversations, we find that retailers are generally nervous about adopting these technologies. And I like your idea that, if you are nervous, then take a small little thing and implement on a very few stores and try it out, see how it feels. It's like same thing like, when we go learn any new thing. So that's a good idea, that do a pilot with a one small store or two stores or few stores, and then get everything working so you get the process sorted out and see if you are seeing benefits. One of those things that I see is a challenge that I see when people get into doing these pilots is integrations. All these retailers have so many legacy systems like point of sale, like you mentioned, but there are tons of many more integrations. What do you recommend? What is the process? How would retailers absorb that kind of commitment? How would they work on it? How would they plan? And what should be their approach on integrations when they bring in a super advanced magical technology like RFID into their ecosystem?
That's why they call this a complex solution. This is not like our old solutions was Sensormatic. You set up a read point at the exit and you put on these sensor tags and they beep at you if they stay on the clothing. That's easy. Set it and forget it. This is integrated into the point of sale. It's integrated into the item files. It's integrated into the OMS to give you a rate available to promise for ship from store and buy online pickup at store. It's integrated into all that. So that when we have meetings with retailers, we typically will want store operations to understand how it affects their daily operations. IT to understand what you want to integrate into and how they want to ingest that information. Think about this. RFID serializes every item. So as opposed to a barcode that you've got 1,000 items at the same barcode, with RFID, it's 1,000 different license plates that everything has. So the question is how far in the enterprise do you want to reflect that? In a lot of cases, they don't want that information to be that granular at the enterprise level, but at the store level, you want to know if an item walked out the front door with someone that's stealing it, you want to know which item left with the customer, or which item was sold to that customer, so that when they return it, you'll know that customer had that item. So what I love about RFID is it makes everything more granular. So there is a retailer that we did business with that started to integrate RFID at the exits as well to understand. Now they understand what left the store, what walked out. It used to be where you just had a beep and all of a sudden you said what just left the store. You didn't really know, right? Because it was generic. In this case, now they know what left. You have video. You know who left with it. You know from what part of the store it left, what time of the day, and what a lot of these asset protection people were finding out. It was counterintuitive to when they thought things were being stolen. Now they know when it's being stolen. So it's really fascinating how the amount of visibility is so off the charts with this that it's giving a retailer an understanding on where their inventory is going at any point in time.
Wow. So you're saying that it's like the most elaborate integration you see is at the point of sale system, where you have to get all those license plates in the point of sale system, so we can start connecting with the sales, and which gives the actual insight into the items, like which item was sold to the customer. That's fascinating. In fact, in my experience, as we implement our OMS for buy online pickup in store and enabling the ship from store, we've seen that the integration with all different inventory management systems, like a typical retailer has so many inventory management systems. Just getting those integrations in place is a lot of work, and it requires much more managed effort. So I believe if an organization already had a RFID working, our job would be easier. It would be much easier for Hotwax to come and bring in our solution. So that's exciting. I hope that you are selling more and more of those to the retailers, so they are getting ready for.
Well, let me just tell you this, Anil. When I was at eBay and I was selling we had what's called a two-tier order broker system. We would tie into anyone's OMS, so Sterling, Manhattan, whoever it was, Hotwax, whoever it was, we had the store order broker system that would just bolt onto that. Ship from store, hands down, one of the greatest solutions I've ever sold in my entire life, because it's instant money when you turn that on and leverage 10, 20, 100, 300 stores worth of inventory local to the customer. It is off the rails. It's so good. And then when you move from ship from store, which is great for an apparel retailer that has SKU complexity of style, color, size, you can't carry depth of everything, right? So therefore, to be able to leverage stores all across the country to be able to ship it out to a customer because your fulfillment center may not have the stock, that's a beautiful thing. But when you move to 1,000 stores where you've got a store within 10 miles of 90% of the U.S. population, BOPIS becomes the thing. And now BOPAC, buy online pickup at curbside, that's a natural progression of that. That is magic, because now BOPIS, what you've done is you've got a customer who starts their journey online, and then they go to the physical store and pick it up, and 20 to 30% of those people buy more when they go to the store. So it's magic for a CEO to have that interaction. And when a customer, goes between your channels, they become more loyal. So it's beautiful. It's a beautiful solution. But what happens is when you go from ship to store, you can flip from store to store to find that item to ship it out to the customer. As you know, with BOPIS, it's real time, and you've got an hour to say, I got it. And I'm confirmed it, and I have it set aside for you. Or I have to cancel it. One of our retailers had to cancel 20% of their orders because what they thought was there wasn't there. So with a customer, it's just so important not to cancel things, and not to, you want to be able to say yes in every way possible to a customer. Does that make sense? So anyway, so that's where RFID is foundational. It's behind the scenes with your OMS and what we used to call available to promise inventory. And I don't know if you call that with yours, but being able to show what's available in each of these stores to be able to promise that to the customer, that's just off the rails.
Yeah. We also call it available to promise, and keeping track of that available promise, especially because you have point of sale selling the items. And then you have your BOPIS orders coming in from the web, and then your ship from store coming in from the OMS. All these different sources of orders getting in. So, and then once you are selling or shipping out the item, you have to inform all these parties. So, it just becomes a very, very complex web of information flowing at the same time, keeping track of inventory. It just becomes complex, and we've seen some interesting stories and challenges, but it's fun. That's the complex problem that we love to solve, actually. And it's helped. So it's great. And in fact, yes, with RFID and inventory tracking, especially the rejection of orders, what we see is that right now, in the ship from store and BOPIS processes, we definitely always bake in the cycle count kind of process. So when users, when the picker don't find the item, they would report it. So at least we are recording that item and sending it back to whichever system needs to know that information. So we are correcting it in the real time, but still that is a workaround, I would say. The real solution is if you had RFID, you would exactly know what's in there, so you would not have to reject and record all those variances, all those workarounds.
Oh yeah. There was one retailer that I met with. They're in the office supply space, and they have items that are they have these orphan items that got onesies and twosies that have been sitting in their stores for 6 years. So wouldn't it be nice to be able to cycle count those orphans on a weekly basis and make those available on the web to ship them out to the customer? So what I found is that ship from store actually flushes older or inactive items out quicker. One retailer that we brought a footwear retailer into an apparel retailer that we did business with, and this apparel retailer had web only items that would be returned to stores. And the stores didn't know what to do with those. The stores would, so the way that they handled it is they utilized ship from store to make those, they would put those in the back of the store, and they would make the store web only items that were stuck in their store first available on ship from store. So you flush those out. So it's magical when you can combine the digital and the physical like that to just get through your older inactive items. It's a great tool.
Yeah, I think what we're talking about here is really omni-channel, and I think a lot of retailers call themselves omni-channel because they have a website. And what omni-channel really is the type of network complexity and communication that you guys are talking about, and having everything talk to each other, real-time visibility. That's what true omni-channel is. And if you don't
Yep.
have the types of technology to enable those communication processes, it's really, really hard to actually accomplish with just legacy systems, whether it's barcodes or legacy OMS, or whatever it is that you're dealing with.
Yep.
But I wanted to ask you, because some of the examples that we've talked about so far are really big retailers, whether it's Lululemon or Macy's. And I'm just curious if this technology is for everybody. Is it for small stores as well as these big box retailers, or do you have to have a certain number of stores or items that you're selling?
That's a great question. In that where it started in apparel. So RFID technology is very friendly with apparel, with footwear, with items that are non-metal, non-liquid. So I remember when we went to Camden, New Jersey, and tried to read through a pallet of Campbell's soup, and and you got metal and liquids just blocking anything that goes through that, right? So the natural for RFID is apparel. The one that where it's going to take a long time are the Home Depots, the tools, all the screws, the nails, all those metal items, the grocery chains. So what's interesting, the parallels I use with RFID is, if you probably know this, that if you've been in any of these big cities where they have RFID for tolls, what's interesting is that I don't know what percentage of those folks actually have the active RFID tags in their cars, but now they've got these automatic where you're just blown through a portal that reads those tags, but it also has video to hit the plate for the people who don't have the tags.
Right.
So the way I envision a grocery chain is you would have RFID for the soft lines like Target does. And then for the hard lines, maybe you have these robots that go and actually look at holes in the shelves that actually scan for those holes to help understand what to replenish to those. So it would be a combination of video with RFID in some of these hard goods apparel, hard goods people like a Target, that would solve both of those issues at the same time. So I think it's going to be a hybrid approach for quite a while.
That's interesting. It's futuristic with the robots, for sure. I also wanted to ask you, how would you measure the impact of RFID technology? Obviously, it's a very huge impact, but I think that's actually an area where retailers need to do a lot of work right now, is in accurately measuring the ROI of their technology efforts. So are there any key KPIs or metrics that, in your opinion, retailers should look at when they are analyzing the impact of this implementation?
Yeah, so we did some work with I'll just say it's a luxury retailer. We looked at their omni-channel operations. They had a fulfillment center that was in California. And if you think about fulfillment centers, if you're going to have one fulfillment center, and when I say fulfillment center, I mean each is to customers, distribution centers, cases to stores. So if you have one fulfillment center in the country, when I was with eBay, we had them typically in northern Kentucky, just below Cincinnati. There were a bunch of million square foot fulfillment centers there. That's a great place to put it. This luxury retailer had their fulfillment center in California. And if you think about how many zones you got to go across to just satisfy that east of the Mississippi, that takes you a long time. So if your inventory accuracy is not good, you're going to fail a lot. This one retailer canceled $5.7 million worth of omnichannel orders because they couldn't find it or find it in time. That's
Wow.
criminal, right? So we would look at their cancellations. We would look at your split shipments. We would look at the cost of doing a physical inventory. This chain happened to do two physical inventories a year that they would pay a Regis or a Washington to come in and do a physical inventory, whereas Lululemon, they count their store every week. And they do it with two handhelds, and they do it in less than an hour. So There are all kinds of labor dollars that are involved with what I call the friction of finding out where inventory is. And so Lululemon, here's the great thing. Lululemon used to have a person with a walkie-talkie in the store, and the other person was in the back room, and that person would go to a rounder with all the clothes, and they say, "I need a medium blue of this item. I need a red large of this item," and they would call that back and forth, and they'd have to bring it back and forth, and it was so laborious that when they implemented RFID in 2014, 2015, they eliminated that whole process. They knew exactly what was in the front, exactly what was in the back, and they knew what needed to be replenished automatically. So they said that they paid for their tagging of all their products, all the handhelds, the software, professional services within a year. So the payback was almost instantaneous for them. So it was a natural. And they implemented RFID before they implemented ship from store. So when they started to do ship from store, it was magical. It was easy. And so they knew when they fire off an item, their OMS would go and say, "Go to this store to ship it." They knew with 98% accuracy that they had that item. So it's just phenomenal.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So yeah, Ted, that's a good one. But in your example, I see there's a catch there. Lululemon is a digitally native brand that started, and then so they are in technology. They are always ahead of rest of the world, right?
Yep.
They are so good, and they are always one of the examples in anything omnichannel we talk about. But most of the retail is now with the legacy, right? So that is where you really, we have to see, like, how would you actually deal with the culture and the legacy culture of these companies, that retailers that they have, and what would be how would you present them this same story? Like that is somewhere, I'm more interested to know, because for them it's like a different kind of a work.
You're right. In that retailers, a lot of them don't have the funding to be able to do it. I mean, if you think about pre-COVID, a lot of these apparel retailers were flatlining below in the single digit dollars per share. But here's the way I look at, and I can just say this now because they went into bankruptcy and they're coming back out of it. Lucky Brand Jeans was going to, they were going to deploy RFID. Lucky Brand Jeans they're not the hottest jeans. They were hot maybe 15, 20 years ago, I hate to say. But they had a relationship with one of the big retailers, I can't mention who they are, to where when they would ship as a wholesaler to that department store chain, there would be a dispute between the two of them, to where, you know what, I sent 12, no, you sent 10. I sent 18, no, I sent 12, whatever it is. So they call that chargebacks. And Lucky Brand Jeans had $1 million worth of chargebacks that they had to absorb just with that one wholesale customer. So that cost them a lot of money, right? So it's so you've got to and so getting back to that retailer, you've got to find in each of these retailers the change agent, whoever that person is, who knows. Like with Omnichannel, it's the same thing with Omnichannel. You got to find someone who has the vision to be able to say, we have to do this. This is a must-have, and then help me figure out how to present this to my executives so that there's an ROI there. You got to be able to show it. I showed a clear ROI with ship from store. I had I'll just say it was Payless. Payless was not doing ship from store, and I said to my friend who was the CIO, Jeff Lauro, I said you're going to see a 20% lift in your e-commerce business, and it wasn't really a lift. It was that you were going to save those 20% cancellations at the peak season when you were jammed up 4 to 5 weeks behind your deliveries and you had to cancel the order. And sure enough, after a first full year of ship from store, we saw 20% of their business being shipped from their stores, and it was saving those sales that would have been canceled. So but you got to find a change agent in each of these retailers to be able for them to have the vision to move this thing forward, because some of them give up on it. I mean, I'll just say Banana Republic and Gap, they've tried a few times with RFID and they've given up on it. And so it's unfortunate that it happens, but that's they just haven't figured out a way to justify it for their supply chain. And right now, as you know, Gap's not doing well. Old Navy's doing well, but Gap is not doing well. So it's kind of fascinating. What you find is the chains that are the innovative, like Target, they're the ones that are going all in on all the different technologies because they know how to satisfy their customer. You look at someone like Kohl's, they've kind of given up on RFID. And so they're finding it's more difficult for them, and their costs of delivering, ship from the store, it's just they're not doing as well.
Yeah, it's so interesting that so much of it comes down to culture, and not the technology itself. And you can say that for most technologies that have to do with omnichannel at this point, is the ROI is there. Honestly, anybody can see it. If you want to do, if you're talking about BOPIS, ship from store, RFID, you can show the ROI. But ultimately, if you have leadership in the organization that's afraid of change, and afraid to take the leap, especially in a difficult economic context like we're facing today, it can be really hard to just get over that hump, and that's the really unfortunate part of it, because it would definitely help them. Um, as we wrap up here, I did want to ask you, because a lot of retailers, consultants, and retail pundits, they're all talking about the store of the future right now, even though very few retailers are actually, ready right now to meet their future. But there's a lot of different predictions out there, and everyone's talking about all of these different technologies and how they could be eventually integrated within the shopping experience, whether it's virtual reality or something else. So I'm curious what the store of the future means to you. If there's any trends outside of RFID, or trends that intermingle with RFID that are catching your eye.
We had a store of the future set up when I was with eBay in New York City, where we would show a customer, for instance, a BOPIS customer who comes in and they're picking up their BOPIS order. Say they 20 to 30% of the time they want to get more when they're in that store. How do you take the friction out of that process? In other words, do they have to sit in line with all those people on the point of sale, or can they just continue the process to hit one click and say, add this order, add it to my wallet, boom, done, you walk out the store. So I think the more that retailers can take the friction out of it, the more they combine the virtual and the physical together, to make that process easy, how much of it can be self-serve. I'm telling you, when I go to Home Depot and I see the self-checkout open, I'm all over it. But if I see someone that's stuck, that doesn't know how to do it, there's no chance I'm going to do it. So they have to make that process, the checkout process, easier. In other words, you at some point, does RFID just read the whole cart when you drive through, and then they take that process out. Taking the mundane purchases, like some of your grocery purchases that are non-meats and fish and vegetables, how do you take that process out to where it's just delivered to your home? I love that. Or when I go to Total Wine, I love when I know on my app exactly what I want. I go to my spot, I open up my back, they put it in, I'm out. It's beautiful. That is such magic. So that creates a sense of loyalty that's off the rails in my world, and I love anyone who takes the friction out of my world. So that's where I see the future of retailers, when they can do that and make it, just hit the easy button. Just make it easy. Yeah.
We definitely agree with you there, and I'll say it again, is what you're talking about is true unified commerce and true omni-channel, which is something that unfortunately so few retailers have actually achieved to this point, but that's the dream.
It is.
But we'll leave it there with that, optimistic prediction about the future. It's been such a pleasure having you on and talking about this really interesting technology that I don't think gets talked about enough in the industry. But before we sign off, we always like to give our guests kind of an opportunity to tell our audience what's going on with them, and how they can keep up with you as well.
So what's going on with me? What I'm going to do right after this? I'm going to jump on my Peloton, because I will tell you, it is. So as you know, everything like home theater with Best Buy, that's why they're doing so well. And Dick's Sporting Goods with the home equipment. We bought a Peloton. I never thought I'd do this. We bought a Peloton, and I've never been committed to a workout program like that in my life. It's the fastest 30 minutes of exercise I've ever gone through. And it's like, I call it the Catholic Church of workout. It's sit, kneel, stand, sit, kneel, stand. That's why you stay awake in the Catholic Church, right? But it's literally, you go through an exercise so quickly, and it just helps you so much. And so I love stuff like that, and my wife has embraced it. Now my son's embraced it, and we're all in. And so it's got this crowdsourcing where a friend of mine's brother said, "Hey, I just saw you on this right. I was right behind you on this one session." And so it creates a sense of community. It's really cool. So that's what I just love. That I encourage anyone to do that and jump on those bikes because they're just off the rails. So good. So
I love it.
Yep.
All right. Well, again, it's been such a pleasure having you on. And again, we encourage our audience to really look into RFID technology and all of the benefits for the retail industry.
Thanks, Fabiana. Thanks, Anil.
Thanks, Ted. Yep.
Hey, good selling out there. Take care.
Yeah.
That's it for this episode of the Customer Centric Retailing Podcast, featuring our special guest, Ted McCaffrey. Ted is certainly an RFID expert and a true believer in the power of this technology to provide retailers with much needed transparency and visibility into their inventory. In his opinion, it's time to toss out antiquated barcodes and focus instead on new and precise tools that meet the moment. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Please rate and review and recommend to a friend or fellow retail fanatic. This podcast is brought to you by Hot Wax Commerce.